Hello everybody, this is Blake Miles from the Catalyst Program, and it's our next episode of the Boots of the Boardroom podcast, and we're excited to be joined by Owen Sizemore today. Owen, how are you doing?
Hey, doing good, Blake. How are you doing?
Doing pretty well. Great to have you here. Always enjoy doing these podcasts with our alumni from the Catalyst Program, and for those of you who don't know, the Catalyst Program, we're a veteran transition program that emphasizes teaching veterans how to speak the language of business so they can translate what they did in the military into something that the private sector can both understand and find value in. And Owen is one of our alumni from previous cohorts, and he's definitely done that. And that's why we have him here today, to talk about some of his experiences going through the military and how he transitioned out of the military into the private sector and what he's up to now. So briefly, the Catalyst Program, one of our primary vehicles of how we teach veterans that language is through our cohorts, and our cohorts are run through different educational institution partners, and we have a large supply of guest instructors, veterans that were successful in the private sector themselves, that come in and teach different courses around everything you'd learn underneath an MBA program. We have a condensed timeline where you're drinking water from a fire hose, which I know many veterans are used to doing that, going through training in the military. And so you get a firm understanding of what it looks like to be doing different MBA type disciplines out in the private sector, everything from marketing to finance, accounting, consulting, everything in between. And so as I mentioned, Owen went through the cohort not too long ago. When did you go through the cohort again? I always forget these numbers.
Summer of 2024.
Okay, all right. So that was recent. I knew you were recent. I just couldn't remember how recent. I didn't want to make a fool of myself. But yeah. So Owen, I kind of introduced myself. But if you could introduce your background and where you're coming from and what you're doing now, and we'll riff off of that.
All right. Yeah. First of all, Blake, thanks for having me, man.
Thank you.
Happy to be here. So my name is Owen Sizemore. I am a recovering CPA. I am technically a licensed CPA, but I don't do what you might imagine traditional CPA work to be. So I don't do audit. I don't do tax. I don't do bookkeeping. What we do is we do business valuation, forensic accounting, and litigation support. What that means is if there's a reason for a business to be valued, whether the owner is thinking about selling or somebody's looking to buy a business, there's valuation compliance that comes with estate taxes if a business owner passes away. There's compliance that comes with gifting, I should say, business interest to somebody else. So let's say there's a multi-generational family business. It's time to transition ownership to the next generation. Usually that needs to be valued for tax purposes, whatever that business interest is. And then we do it on the litigation side. So you think of we'll say two shareholders, they want to part ways, somebody needs bought out, and it's contentious. We can come in and do that. Divorces, if a business owner is getting divorced, that business needs valued. And then on the forensic accounting side, it's kind of what it sounds like, and that can take us into a lot of different types of projects. So I won't bore you with the details on that, but let's just say we do forensic accounting work as well. So I do it for a firm called MHCPA based in Champaign, Illinois. I just started here in December. Thanks to the Catalyst Program, which I'm sure we'll talk about more, so I won't get into that piece yet. But the service line is called MH Transaction Services. This firm has not traditionally had this service line. And so they've brought me in and my colleague, Bethany Hearn, who was a national practice leader at a top 10 CPA firm. They've brought us in to build out this service line of all these specialty services. So I've been in the accounting world for, I'm going on 14 years, I think. 14 years. So I was an auditor for the first 6 or 7, and then transitioned to this specialty service stuff. So that's me. That's me at a high level.
Excellent. All right. No, and that help. And I'm going to ask about the recovering CPA because that sounds like an interesting topic. But so going back, you're explain a bit about your military background too, and that's one of our obviously our driving force in a veteran transition program is that transition out of the military into the private sector. I know me personally, I had a lot of troubles with it, and that's why I'm where I'm at now. And I know plenty of other veterans have had similar experiences that difficulty. So kind of just to give the audience a better understanding of where you're coming from and your background, go into a bit of that, like how did you join the military, and what did that all look like?
Sure. Yeah. So I was never supposed to go to college. That was not in the plan for me going through high school. The plan was to join the Marines, active duty, right out of high school. And somewhere towards the end of my senior year of high school, mom and dad got a little desperate, and they said, "Hey, look, just try the college thing for a semester or 2. If you don't like it, we'll support you. You just leave, go to the Marines, and we'll help you pay for that first semester or 2. And I thought, well, this seems like a win-win. Worst case scenario, I have a good time, and then I join the Marines, and I don't have to leave right after graduating, right? Well, something unexpected happened because I was a terrible student for most of my life. I got out of high school by the hair of my chin, barely graduated. But then when I went to college, it turned out that I actually liked learning when I had a little bit more flexibility in my schedule.
Crazy how that happens.
Yeah. and I don't know, something happened where I kind of got a chip on my shoulder because I think a lot of people didn't expect me to succeed there, and rightfully so. I gave them no reason to believe that I would. And so between the schedule and just enjoying the learning process in a collegiate environment, and all of a sudden deciding I had something to prove, compromised with mom and dad. So what I said was, all right, I'm still going to be a Marine, but I want to be an officer. So I want to join the reserves, going to go to OCS in the summertime, and then when I graduate, Marines full time, when I graduate college. And that's what I pursued. So I left partway through my freshman year to join the Marine Reserves as an infantry guy, came back for a full year of school, went to OCS that following summer, which would have been the summer of my sophomore year. And then more or less the next year, we deployed overseas. And there's a lot to the story, but what I'll say is that changed everything. That changed the plan.
Sure.
And so in the meantime, I had picked accounting, thinking I was never going to be an accountant. But I thought, well, I like numbers, and numbers are the thing that comes easiest to me. So I'll pick the easiest degree I can and, kind of skate by on that. And then I'll be a Marine officer, and, that'll be it. And so, I come back from Iraq, I'm like, well, I don't want to do that again. I don't know what the heck I'm going to do. And I just kind of half-assed my way through my degree, and just sort of fell in to having to find a job that I never thought I was going to have to find. And I had a terrible GPA when I graduated college. And so it was tough. I had my first job out of school, I was answering phones for the Ohio Department of Taxation, their customer service department. Only job I could get, I think it was like $14, $15 an hour. Maybe it was $16 an hour at the time.
Yeah.
So certainly not what I wanted to do, but again, because I didn't have a plan, didn't have direction, that's where I landed. And so, it took me a while to get refocused, started working on getting the CPA exam done because I knew if I wanted to get out of what I was doing and get into more meaningful accounting work, that was a good way to do it. Yeah. And, eventually got the job that I should have gotten out of college. It took me about 2 years to get there. but eventually got a job at the CPA firm in Cincinnati, and more or less, there's been some bumps in the road, but more or less the rest has been history.
What was the time frame you were over in Iraq?
We got in country in March of 06 and left in October of 06.
Okay, we were there around the same time. Then I was there in January 06 till September of 06. So
okay,
all right.
Yeah, we were Ramadi and Fallujah, basically mostly Ramadi, but we did some stints in Fallujah too on the police transition team.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, it was volatile times.
Yeah, indeed. Yeah.
Especially where you were at. All right. Well, so and I got to touch on this one too, because I kind of experienced a similar thing going through college after wasting a lot of my time and everyone else's time in high school. I think I can relate with that one. So when I went back into college, that was one of the first things I noticed as well, was I actually really enjoyed learning, like sitting in a classroom environment, or even to a lesser degree on the online environment. It's a bit different. It's improved a lot. But what do you think that is about the, starting off in high school? And I think you might have touched on it too, having that flexibility of a schedule. But do you think there's something else to that enjoyment of the learning process that you experienced or developed, or where do you think that comes from?
Yeah, I think the collegiate environment is, even just being in the classroom is a little more liberating. They tend to not, at least in my experience, they didn't really bog you down with busy work.
Yeah.
You're not in the classroom 7-8 hours a day like you are in high school. So that helped a lot for me, especially as a guy who had never done well in school. Like, I wasn't about to start doing well, having to sit there for 7 hours. And again, like I said, I had a chip on my shoulder a little bit, and I knew that real money was at risk on part of my parents. I didn't want to squander the fact that my education was so important to them. Coming from a lower middle class family, that I didn't want to squander that. They were, paying out of pocket to get me to go.
Yeah.
At least for that first semester or two, which was the deal. So, so there's a lot at play there, but certainly the flexibility helps. Most of your classes don't start until 8 or 9, and you're not there all day. Yeah. And so that was a big help for me.
That makes a lot of sense. I think for me, there is something to that process of starting off in a certain, especially in like business law, that for whatever reason I discovered this is really interesting to me, and going into these different areas where you wouldn't have expected having an interest in, and then discovering that for one reason or another there's something there that's intriguing, and you want to start pulling on that thread, and you motivate yourself to learn rather than being threatened with bad grades just to get out of the doors of high school at some point. So that makes sense. All right, so fast forward a bit further, you find yourself working towards that CPA pathway. How did you find out about the Catalyst program?
Yeah, so I was pretty far into my career when I found out about the Catalyst program. Because, like I said, 14 years in.
Yeah.
Really 16 years in, because I graduated college in 09. But I don't count the first 2 years because I wasn't doing what I wanted to do. But anyway, Catalyst program, I think it all started with a LinkedIn connection to Daniel Hans. He showed up on my LinkedIn feed, and I'm pretty active on LinkedIn. And I was reading his profile. I'm like, oh, yeah, he's probably a good guy to. I know he had lived in Ohio for some part of his life. I'm an Ohio guy, and so I just sent him a note. I was like, hey man, just love to connect. Veterans helping veterans, and that quickly led to a conversation request on Dan's part, and I think that was in March or April of 2024. And he had actually had the opportunity that I have now. And he was like, hey, I got some opportunities in Illinois and some other places, and He's like, are you interested in moving to Illinois? I was like, well, no, not really. To be honest with you.
Common response for a lot of people, I think.
But I was like, no, I don't really want to do this Catalyst program thing. It seems like a big time commitment, and I don't know what happened. Daniel being Daniel, I was like, yeah, I ended up enrolling, and because I thought, well, yes, it's going to be a big time commitment, but I do get a sense that Daniel gets some really neat opportunities. It's a chance to connect with other veterans.
Yep.
I mean, it can't hurt, right? It's going to take some time, but that's okay. So I kind of begrudgingly did it, but I'm glad that I did.
No, I think that's a pretty common occurrence, and I think that probably lends itself to what you mentioned, just the time commitment, because it is a time commitment, but just like all things, what you put into it is what you're going to get out of it, and I think you definitely satisfied that requirement as far as how things went for you going through the cohort. So tell me a bit about, and for the audience's sake, I'm behind the curtain during the cohorts. I'm present for a lot of the classes and interacting, and usually doing things behind the scenes to make sure things are running smoothly, but I don't have a 100% active role in every class, so I don't know all the intricate details of how things are playing out during the course. So kind of tell me a bit about your experiences in the actual cohort, like what you expected before you went, once you started going through the classes and interacting with the other candidates. How did that go for you?
Yeah, well, you describe it really well. I mean, it truly is like cramming a business education into the cohort timeline, whatever it was, 8 weeks.
I think if you're in SMU, it was 8 weeks.
8 weeks, okay. I mean, it really is. You touch on operations, communication, finance, accounting. I mean, you touch on everything that you would in a traditional business administration program. So the program is really good at just, I'll say you go decently deep too. I mean, you do cram a lot into those 8 weeks. There's a lot of knowledge, great instructors. You touch on the subjects you need to. For me, I don't know that, I won't say there was a ton of surprises. I will say I was definitely impressed with the quality of the instructors, the quality of the materials, because for me it was all a review. Yeah, I'd gone through a business administration program. I'd gone through an MBA program, which I wrapped up in 2016. So it was mostly review, not all of it, but quality instructors and materials, and the breadth of materials was really good. And then I'll tell you the consulting projects at the end, where you kind of bring it all together. They're excellent, because it gets people thinking about all the things that they have learned throughout the cohort. Forces people into a team scenario, which you never get out of being on a team. It doesn't matter what organization you're in. You're on some kind of team. You're accountable to somebody just beyond your boss. And so. Yeah, it was a good program. It was a really good program.
Excellent. That always makes me happy to hear. And I think for me personally, the consulting projects are probably my favorite component of the cohorts, for the reason you mentioned. Well, from my perspective, I guess on the back end, it's the best part about them is seeing all of the team dynamics and then the various solutions that they come up with, because they're all coming at it from different angles, based on their own experiences, and giving that shotgun blast of, here's some potential solutions for you, client, and of all of the different recommendations, they're pulling things out of there that are definitely used and forged ahead with. So, all right, that's great to hear. And a bit more, I wanted to go back on this recovering CPA concept, because I personally also dabbled in the accounting pathway when I was in college, and ran into a brick wall, I think, on accounting too, and did not invest the time needed to actually memorize all of those formulas, and that's I think what got me. So the recovering CPA thing, kind of expand on that a bit. I'm curious to hear.
Yeah. So working in a public accounting firm, they're notorious for burning people out. Yeah, it's a tough way to make a living. And now there's way harder ways to make a living, so don't get me wrong on that. But accounting firms traditionally have very high turnover because of the hours, the education requirements, the licensure requirements to get the CPA license. And a lot of people, a traditional path is you go in, you pay your dues in a public accounting firm. Hopefully you do it at one of the larger firms, one of the big 4 international firms. You grind it out for 3 to 5 years, maybe more, and you leave. And that's usually the plan most people have. And that was really my plan for a long time. I didn't. My first couple of years in, I didn't see myself trying to make a career out of being inside of an accounting firm. And so that's what I did. I did the audit thing for several years, and I was fairly certain. I consistently believed I did not want to be an audit partner at a CPA firm. Now, things change, right? There were moments like, I don't know, maybe I do. I like client serving. I like the entrepreneurial spirit of CPA firms, especially smaller ones. But the recovering piece is I got out of audit. I got out of the stuff you traditionally do graduating college. You either do audit or tax for the most part. There are exceptions, but the traditional path is you do one of those, grind it out, and leave and go do something totally different. So I recovered from my audit days, but still sticking it out in the CPA firm environment, just doing funner stuff, in my opinion.
Yeah, well, that makes a lot of sense, and I think it touches on the concept around what the Catalyst goal is you spend your time in the military, you pick up these different skill sets that are hard earned, and especially if it's leadership skills you pick up going overseas and doing things like that. You do your time, you pay your dues, and then you move on to something else that is more in line with what you're wanting to do, or more interesting to you along those lines. And I think that translation component really comes into play, because you took your skill sets from the years of auditing and tax, and now you're leveraging it into something that's more enjoyable and more rewarding, it sounds like. And I guess on that piece, and this is usually one of the questions I tend to ask on all of these different episodes, is from your time in the military, from your time to where you're at now in the private sector, what do you think was the most valuable skill set that you translated over from the military?
Well, certainly grit, because if you're going to be successful in the business world, you got to have grit. You got to be able to just bravely get through things that suck. And nothing teaches that better than the military, in my opinion. And so certainly grit, a sense of selflessness, right? A commitment to your team that you learn in the military. I think you don't always get the experiences you need in a business environment to come in with a sense of selflessness and a commitment to those around you, like you do in the military. I mean, I don't think many places teach that better than the military. Certainly people who are athletes, they're for the duration of their lives, they get that. But a lot of people, I shouldn't say a lot of people, but it's just a different way of thinking about your selflessness when you come from the military, in my opinion. So, commitment to the team, teamwork, putting the team's needs above my own, grit, I'd say probably the key things that I took out of the military and brought into the business world.
Did you find that, and I know this is probably me talking more personally and projecting it onto you, but
Go for it, man.
Yeah, no, trying to translate that was always a challenge for me, because that was something I inherently kind of absorbed and understood, and I thought, hey, that those are things that I can take outside of the military, and that will open doors for me. Just having that built in internally. But for you, do you think that it was a challenge in translating that, or how did you translate that, if you did? I guess is kind of a two-part divergent question.
Yeah, I think the military, quite frankly, I don't know that it opened a ton of doors for me.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that's right or wrong or whatever. I just don't know that it did.
Sure.
But it did open one door, which was the door to Barnes Denigan Company, the first CPA firm I worked at. That's all that I needed.
Yeah.
And the reason is the HR director there at the time was an Air Force veteran. And and his son was a Marine veteran who's older. He's older. I've never met him, but I know of him. Mm-hmm. And his son was a Marine veteran, very similar path to mine as well. And so he knew of the value. And so he convinced the partners at Barnes Denigan Company to take a chance on a Marine veteran with no experience and a terrible GPA, basically. So I don't think what I learned in the military, it didn't open a ton of doors, but it did open one important door. And I would say that changed the entire trajectory of my career. But while I don't think my experience in the military opened a ton of doors, what it did do was help me thrive once I got in.
Yeah.
I was a little bit older than my peers, for sure, which is to be expected. But I think the people I worked with could see, my commitment to hard work. They could see my commitment to my teammates, and I think that helped.
No, I think that probably is similar to what I was thinking as well. You articulated it very nicely, though. It's the sense that if I could just get in that open door, once I get in, I'll be able to do what's needed and be successful and effective. And I think that's probably one of the things that, going back to my transition around the 2015 time frame, I was working with the Green Beret Foundation on their transition program, and that's kind of what I sensed is it needs to be less of a library structure, just like a dead library where you can go and find resources. There's no shortage of programs like that or organizations like that, but more of a fraternity type arrangement where people that have been successful in the private sector can open doors for people that are just coming through, they're trying to find a door to go through. And when I read about the Catalyst program, that was a big part of what attracted me to it. So yeah, I think we're on similar pages there, which is good. And I think from your perspective, let's say you're talking to someone just about to get out of the military, what kind of advice would you offer to them as far as that broader picture of, how do you make those opportunities? How do you find that success? How do you get into where you want to be, as opposed to drifting aimlessly through the wilderness, or for your language, drifting in the ocean blindly?
Well, it's yeah, I think one, you have to tell people that you have to tell veterans, listen, you can't just hang your hat on the fact that you're a veteran. Definitely. I'm not saying the world doesn't owe you something. I'm just saying the world doesn't care if they do or do not owe you something. So most organizations aren't going to roll out the red carpet for you and say, gosh, we're so glad we can hire a veteran. Most organizations, they're just not going to do that. Again, I'm not saying that's right or wrong, they're just not. Yeah. And so, telling people setting that realistic expectation that it's going to take work. You're going to have to, if you can't get doors open for you, you're just going to have to beat them down. You're going to have to be humble. and recognize that it's just going to take work. You're going to have to work on your resume. You're going to have to, work on your interviewing skills. You're going to have to do a lot. There are organizations out there that want you, but it's probably not as plentiful as you think it is. And you're going to have to take your resume of because you see people come out of the military with these like 8-page resumes, right? I mean, I'm exaggerating a little bit, but
yeah.
Someone that worked for the federal government, civilian or military, and then they have these massive resumes. And so you're just going to have to work very hard at translating what you did into meaningful experience to the private sector, and it's probably going to be harder than you think it is. So that's one. Humble, realistic expectations on how that's going to look for you, and then two, you got to have realistic expectations on what positions you're going to get. And I mean, it's really a matter of like, yeah, you probably get a job, but are you, if you were, let's say you're a captain, you're a company commander, are you really going to step into the business world and be in charge of 100 to 150 people? Highly doubt it. Highly doubt it. In fact, you may not be in charge of anybody.
Yeah.
And so just, again, understanding and having realistic expectations is huge. And then, along with that, just putting in the work, doing things like the Catalyst, just doing everything you can to find people that are willing to help you and give you advice that you're willing to take. That's it, man. I mean, there's no magic formula to it other than humility and hard work and having realistic expectations on what it's going to look like for you.
That's excellent advice, and I'm struck by the similarity. Like, you could take that same conversation to someone that's thinking about joining the military and have that with them, and it would the only difference would be is there's an obvious promotion path. Just show up to work and don't be a goofball, and you'll probably get promoted at some point.
Yeah.
Other than that, though, all of those things apply. It's just you stay humble, keep your head down, take advice from people that you trust that are also doing well and not screwing up, and you too can be successful in the military. And something you said about the gigantic resume, it kind of sparked a thought in my head. When I'm talking, I do a lot of the initial phone conversations with veterans that are interested in going through the program, and kind of I call it my spiel, but it's the kind of the same things I say to each of them, especially along the lines of that translation piece, is the things that you did in the military, if you list them all out on paper, might look great on paper, but if you don't speak the language of a hiring manager and an executive in these different roles, none of that is 98% of the writing, the bullet points you have on your last NCOER or your evaluation reports, in case we're talking to a non-military audience here. Those bullet points on that evaluation report probably aren't going to mean anything to a hiring manager, and unless you have the language understanding of what the business leader is speaking and what the hiring managers are looking for, you're not going to be able to translate that effectively either on paper or in person. And if you don't have that ability, you're going to be missing a lot of opportunities, just because the doors will not open for you just because you have that "I'm a veteran" tagline. And I think you're exactly right on that. Yeah, we're on the same page there. And it's tough because they have served our country, and I think we can all agree we want to see all of our veterans succeed and leave that behind, if they so choose, leave that behind and find meaningful work in the civilian sector. But we all want that, but the fact of the matter is, it takes a lot of work for them to do it. Yeah. And kind of what I've been seeing from a very high level picture on this veteran transition problem set is, again, it goes back into these conversations I have on these first phone calls, is I explain it as like the veteran military space speaks a dialect of English, and then the business world speaks a different dialect of English, and there's not much cross-cultural communication between the two outside of movies you see on Hollywood, and those are, it's like you might as well still be speaking gibberish on both sides of the equation, because the veteran world is going to hate it, and the non-veteran world is going to be lost on them. So building those bridges between the two worlds and building up those communication channels that are open and effective and not garbled in between, that's what's ultimately going to create more real opportunities for veterans on their way out. And both sides of the equation are going to, ideally, and this is my magical future thinking that I'm rambling through on a podcast, is as both of those parties develop that language communication, both sides will see the value proposition opposite of each other and grow more effectively towards something that is actually useful, and both sides get a lot of value out of it. I guess from your perspective on that note, like, have you noticed any difference, like, after going through the cohort, that language translation concept? Have you noticed any of that in your day-to-day operations, or seen anything similar to that? I'm kind of curious now.
Well, I would say learning that language translation,
and you've been doing it for years, so it's a bit different. But
that started for me a long time ago. I had finished a degree in around the same time that I got out, and was looking for work in the civilian sector, and so that language translation was something that I had to learn on the job, if you will. It definitely there were some growing pains there, because and I always go back to a buddy that I served with when I got out. He came to me and said, "Look, man, you can't get out." And I was like, "Why?" But he said, "You're not going to know how to talk to people." And he wasn't exactly wrong. Aside from just like using technical terms and all that, there's that piece of the language translation barrier, but then there's also the piece of some veterans are just rough around the edges and kind of in your face in how they communicate, and that was probably me, probably still is, to a degree. And so you got to learn that, like, that puts people off. You're talking to people who are not used to being talked to how your E4s and your E3s are being talked to, and so it's certainly the jargon piece, but it's also just how you show up, how your energy is, how your body language is. You got to learn that too, and that was probably the hardest thing for me to learn. Again, probably maybe even still learning it to an extent, but I think I'm way better now than I was when I first stepped foot inside an office building.
For sure. And I guess since I think we're in similar situations in that I didn't go through the cohort until, so it was 10 years after I completely got out, and you were kind of along that same timeline. I felt much more confident on that, understanding the language difference. I guess you could just distill it down into a simple sentence. But after your time in the cohort, was there anything that you took away as like one of those gems of knowledge that you picked up during the cohort? It's been 4 years for me, so and I've had it all blurred together by a bunch of additional cohorts that I sat through. So it's a bit more fresh in your mind. I'm kind of curious, was there any sort of those gems that you picked up and said, yeah, I'm holding on to this one and taking it to heart?
Yeah, I mean, certainly I think because I'd had a resume for years, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, but you guys took a look at my resume and saw some things on there, particularly in my military experience, that was still probably written in more military jargon than it should have been that I'd just been totally blind to, because it was just a stale section of my resume for the most part.
Yeah.
So that was pretty valuable. Just those little insights on rewording how I portray my military experience to the world, even though it was, 20 years ago at this point. But then also, I some of the technical stuff that we studied, like Matt Rowe's class. It is Matt Rowe, right?
For consulting.
Yeah. His class on processes and you know, it was like a lean. I call it like a lean, Six Sigma class. I don't know if that's actually what it was called, but his some of the technical stuff he talked about on identifying a problem and weeding out waste in a business process was really cool. Yeah, I'd say those are two big ones. Yeah, I've really enjoyed Matt's class. I honestly enjoyed all of them. And then honestly, the communications class that was taught, I forget the professor's name.
Professor Gustafson.
Penn State guy, right?
Yep.
Yeah, his communications class was really good too. Just kind of got some gems on how to present that maybe were lost on me or weren't formalized concepts in my mind. I'd say those are the three biggest pieces. You know, refresh my resume, the military space in my resume, Matt Rowe's class, and the communications piece was really good.
Awesome. That's those are valuable. I appreciate that. That's good insights. Well, so I guess I think we kind of reached a limit here as far as directions to go. But you know, one question I always like to ask is there any advice that you would have, you know, talking to someone that's just about to get out of the military and where they're wanting to go regardless of the industry or field? Any kind of closing recommendations or comments that you have?
Yeah, I mean, get on LinkedIn, find veterans that are in that field, and try to get some time with them and learn as much from them as you possibly can. That's one. Obviously, the humility piece that we talked about and managing expectations, you know, that's huge. Understanding that it's going to take work. People aren't just going to roll out the red carpet for you because you served your country, regardless of the capacity in which you served it. And yeah, just work hard. You know, find people who are doing what you do and find ways to talk to them about it. Be humble, work hard, and you know, find programs like the Catalyst and get involved. You know, there's all kinds of transition programs out there. They're not all created equal. From my vantage point, because again, like we discussed, I obviously wasn't transitioning when I went through the Catalyst program, but I saw people that were. Yeah. And Catalyst seems like an excellent program to give you some basic skills to at least talk to the people that you're going to be able to get in front of. But then, of course, Catalyst, you know, on their own, on the back end, they do what they can to actually get you real opportunities. So, you know, it's a good way to connect the education piece to the opportunity piece and integrate them. So, you know, find a program like Catalyst, or, you know, maybe there's another one out there that's better fit. I don't know, but from what I can tell, the Catalyst is really good. Yeah, just ask for help. Yeah, just ask for help and take it.
That's great advice. Excellent advice. Awesome. Well, Owen, I really appreciate you joining the show today, and I hope you enjoyed it as well. Always good to talk to you, and hopefully we'll see you at more events with the Catalyst in the future. I'm sure we got a virtual networking event coming up in the not too distant future, so maybe you want to come back and teach a class on consulting sometime, or CPA accounting.
I'd love to, man. Yeah.
That'd be great. Cool.
Yeah, and I'll say one more thing on this. You know, for the people listening, and you know, if anyone out there is interested in accounting, forensic accounting, or just working for a CPA firm, I'm one of those people. You know, give me a shout. I will always keep my door open, give time to veterans that were going through what I went through. So, you know, I can't help with a lot of other stuff, but if you're interested in a career in accounting, I can't help with that. So I'll just extend this invite to the listeners. You know, feel free to reach out to me. I'm happy to help.
Awesome. That's perfect. Well, Owen, great to see you as always. I really appreciate that offer, and thank you very much. Everyone, thanks for joining us at the Catalyst Program Boots to the Boardroom podcast. I hope to see you next time.
Thanks, Blake.